Covering bruises had become a survival skill. I could apply foundation in the dark, no mirror needed, knowing exactly where to press harder to hide the newest shades of purple. Every morning before putting on my scrubs, I sat in front of the mirror, stared at the face behind the makeup, and whispered, "You're fine. Today, you'll be fine." The hardest part wasn't hiding the marks. It was smiling convincingly enough that the world believed me. My name is Ava Reynolds, 26, an emergency room nurse in New York City. My shifts last 12 hours, the patients change, the monitors beep like the city's own frantic heartbeat. Never steady, never quiet. After work, I trade my scrubs for a waitress uniform and head to Giovanni's, an Italian restaurant where warm light makes people believe life is gentler than it is. I work there 2 nights a week to pay rent, cover my 17-year-old sister Lily's tuition, and sometimes to make up for what Mark, the man I once loved, claims I ruin. Mark doesn't hit me every day, but each time he does, I feel myself shrink a little more. He isn't love anymore. He's a presence waiting in the dark apartment in Brooklyn, a silence that follows me home. I've learned to measure time in bruises, 2, maybe 3 a week. 1 on the wrist, 1 near the ribs, 1 under the collarbone. I thought endurance meant strength. It doesn't. It's just habit. My dream is fragile, almost embarrassing to admit, to transfer to a hospital in Boston to start over. I've saved listings, drafted a resume I never dared to send. Mark checks my phone too often for that. Tonight, I'm on the late shift at Giovanni's. White long-sleeved shirt, black skirt, hair tight. The sleeves cover what they need to. I arrive 10 minutes early. The kitchen smells like olive oil, wine, and stress. Marco, the manager, is shouting, "Ava, table 9's VIP. Try to smile. Don't let them see you're tired." I'm exhausted, the kind of tired that sinks into bone. But I nod, balance the tray, and step into the golden glow of the dining room. Table 9 sits in the quiet corner. 4 men in tailored suits, all polished restraint. They speak in low tones, power coiled beneath civility. The man in the center makes me pause mid-step. He's different. No arrogance, no theatrics, just gravity. Lorenzo DeLuca. I didn't know his name yet, only the weight of being seen by him. His gaze isn't prying, it's recognizing, like he already knows what I'm trying to hide. I approach, refill their glasses. As I lean forward, my sleeve slides up. The faint purple ring around my wrist glows against pale skin. I freeze, too late. His eyes fall on it, dark, sharp, unflinching, and for a moment the room goes silent. My pulse hammers in my ears. "Red wine, sir?" I ask, forcing air into my lungs. He nods slightly. "Thank you, Ms. Reynolds." My stomach twists. My name tag only says Ava. How does he know my name? I keep pouring, but the tray wobbles. Sweat slicks my palm. A glass tips dangerously. Time stretches. Then a strong hand closes around my elbow, steadying everything. His grip is firm, controlled, and the world steadies with it. "Careful," he murmurs, voice low, calm. The scent of smoke and cedar lingers on him. His hold doesn't hurt. It feels like restraint, strength that chooses not to harm. I try to pull back, but he doesn't release immediately. His thumb brushes the edge of my bruise. His eyes harden, the softness vanishing in a heartbeat. "Who did that to you?" The words are quiet steel, enough to still every voice at the table. "I ran into a door," I whisper, "a stupid accident." He studies me, gaze unreadable, then says evenly, "Doors can be dangerous. You should stay away from that kind." The way he says it makes the hairs at the back of my neck rise. He knows. I tug my sleeve down, thank him, retreat. But the rest of the night, I can feel his attention, silent, watchful, as I move through the room. He notices how I carry trays off my uninjured side, how I flinch at Marco's voice, how I check my cuffs again and again. By closing time, my nerves are stretched thin. Lorenzo signs the bill with a swift stroke, buttons his jacket, and stands. His companions leave first. He lingers. When I return to clear the table, I find an envelope of crisp bills beneath a black card. Embossed letters on the front, Lorenzo DeLuca, handwritten on the back. In case the door ever locks from the inside, call me. I stare at it. It feels heavier than paper, like an invitation and a warning. Marco passes behind me, whistling. Big tip, huh? I just poured wine, I answer, too softly for him to hear. When I leave, light rain falls, coating the sidewalks in neon reflections. I tuck the card into my wallet, behind my license, where I'll see it every time I pay for something. I should throw it away. That would be safe. But I don't, because Mark is still waiting at home, and the Boston dream still hides in a drawer. And tonight, for the first time in months, someone touched me and didn't hurt me. A small, impossible mercy, but enough to make my heart remember what hope feels like. I never thought he'd come back. Men like Lorenzo DeLuca don't return. They pass through your life like elegant shadows, leaving a trace, a question, and nothing more. But 4 nights later, he walked back into Giovanni's, alone, just as my shift began. Marco didn't even check the reservation book before hurrying over to pull out a chair. Table 9 again? Lorenzo nodded. Same as last time, and the same waitress, Ava. Hearing my name felt like someone pulling a thread loose inside me. I froze, tray half filled with glasses. My heart picked up, sharp and insistent. I forced a steady breath, grabbed a menu, and approached his table. Good evening, Mr. DeLuca. My voice sounded normal. My pulse didn't. Good evening, Ava. His eyes met mine. How are you? 3 simple words. Somehow they caught in my throat. Nobody ever asked and meant it. I'm fine, thank you. He tilted his head slightly, like he could see the lie resting on my tongue. I placed the menu down, ready to walk away, when he said softly, I didn't think you'd be back at work so soon. People need money, I murmured. Or maybe, he said, barely above a whisper, you need a place to hide. The words landed too close. I forced a smile. Hide from what? He didn't answer, just turned the wineglass in his hand and said, Red, the same one you poured last time. It's the only thing I'd like to repeat. I retreated, pretending not to notice the tremor in my hands. His quiet wasn't threatening, but it made the air heavier. Every word he didn't say felt like something he still knew. The night stayed smooth until just after 9, when the restaurant door slammed open. Mark. His coat hung crooked, his breath sharp with whiskey. My blood went cold. He wasn't supposed to come here. I had begged him not to, but Mark never honored boundaries he couldn't break. Ava, his voice cut through the low music, slicing the calm in half. Heads turned. Marco started toward him, but Mark shoved him aside. You ignoring my calls now? Who the hell are you hiding from? Mark, please, I said quietly. You're drunk. Let's go home. Home? He barked a laugh. You mean his home? The room froze. My chest clenched. You're mistaken. He grabbed my wrist, the same wrist. Pain flared instantly. Mark, stop. I tried to pull back, but his grip only tightened. And then that voice, low, controlled. cutting clean through the noise. Let her go. I turned. Lorenzo was standing, chair pushed back, his expression unreadable but lethal. The hum of conversation died instantly. "This isn't your business," Mark snapped. "She's my girlfriend." Lorenzo's tone didn't change. "No, she's a person, and you're hurting her." Mark sneered. "You got any idea who I am?" "No," Lorenzo said simply. "And I don't care, but I know who she is, and she doesn't deserve that." Mark swung. I barely saw it. In the space of one heartbeat, Lorenzo caught his wrist midair, twisted, stepped forward. The sound of bone and glass colliding filled the room. Mark was face down against the bar before I could even breathe. "Call the police," Marco stammered. Lorenzo didn't look at him. "Take her inside." My body moved before my brain did. Someone pulled me away, and I realized I was shaking. Mark's voice sputtered behind me, half rage, half fear. It was the first time I'd ever heard fear in him. "Lorenzo, don't," I started, but he turned to me, eyes hard enough to still the words. "Go inside, Ava, don't look." I obeyed. The kitchen door shut behind me. A muffled crash followed, then silence. When I stepped back out, Mark was gone. Lorenzo stood at the bar, sleeves rolled up, knuckles wet with spilled wine. The dim light caught the veins along his forearms. He looked calm again, dangerously calm. "He won't come back," he said quietly. I stared at him. "What did you do?" The question died halfway out. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. He handed me a napkin. "You're shaking." I looked down, my fingers still curled into fists, nails cutting skin. I wiped them quickly, blinking away the sting in my eyes. Lorenzo watched me for a long moment. "If anyone ever hurts you again," he said softly, "don't handle it alone. Call me." He walked out, leaving behind the faint scent of smoke and cedar and a silence that throbbed in my chest. When the door closed, I realized my hands were still trembling, not from fear of Mark anymore, but from the strange, unfamiliar weight of feeling safe. When the restaurant door closed behind Lorenzo, I stood there longer than I should have, staring at the space he'd left behind. The rain outside mixed with the clink of cutlery, but it all felt distant, like I had stepped out of a dream tangled between fear and relief. Marco said something I nodded without hearing. I left Giovanni's quietly, walking through the drizzle toward my small Brooklyn apartment, repeating his words in my head. "He won't come back." I wanted to believe it. I wanted to believe Mark was truly gone, but men like him never leave quietly. 2 mornings later, a knock at the door pulled me from half sleep. My heart thudded as I opened it. 2 officers stood in the hallway, badges glinting under the pale light. The taller one spoke first. "Ms. Reynolds, we need to ask you a few questions about Mark Hansen." My breath caught. "What about him?" "His car was found abandoned near Red Hook Pier. Door open, keys missing. Neighbors say you were the last person to see him." The words hit like a slap. I blinked, forcing calm. "We argued. He was drunk." "He left." "I haven't seen him since." "Does he drink often?" "Yes," I said softly. "And when he does, he loses control. I was planning to leave him." They nodded, wrote notes, thanked me, and left. The apartment fell back into silence. I sat on the couch, pressing a hand to my wrist where his grip had left its ghost. Guilt rose thick as fog. I hadn't lied completely, but I hadn't told the truth either. I didn't know exactly what had happened after I was led into the kitchen that night, but I knew who made him disappear. And what frightened me most was the realization that deep down I wasn't sorry. That evening, as I rinsed a mug in the sink, another knock sounded. Gentler this time, deliberate. I didn't need to look through the peephole. When I opened the door, Lorenzo DeLuca stood there in a dark coat, rain glistening on his shoulders. "I didn't know your address," he said, voice low, roughened by the cold. "But Marco owed me a favor. I wanted to make sure you were all right." "You didn't have to come," I said quietly. "I know, I came anyway." He stepped inside, placing a small paper bag on the counter. Inside, a medical kit, bandages, ointment. "Your wrist," he said, nodding toward me. I glanced down. The bruise had deepened, fading at the edges to yellow. I wanted to say I was fine, but the word refused to leave. He sat opposite me, opening the kit, slipping on gloves. His hands were careful, methodical, more like a doctor than the man who had slammed another into a bar days ago. As he worked, his voice broke the quiet, slow and steady, each word heavy. "My father used to hit my mother," he said. "I was 13, the first time I heard the sound of bone breaking. The last time, I stopped it for good." My chest tightened. "You—" He shook his head slightly. "She died 2 years later. Heart failure, they said. But I think some deaths begin long before the body gives up." He tightened the bandage gently, eyes distant. "I saw that same look in you at the restaurant. Not fear, just exhaustion. That's worse." No one had ever spoken to me like that. Not with pity, not curiosity, but understanding. I watched his hands wrap the gauze around my wrist, steady and warm, and for once I didn't pull away. "I don't need saving," I whispered. "I know," he said. "Sometimes people don't need saving, they just need someone to stand next to them until they remember how to save themselves." The apartment filled with the scent of rain and cedar. I sat still, listening to the ticking clock. A part of me stayed wary. This man was dangerous, I knew that. But another part felt quiet. When he finished, he stood. "I won't ask you about Mark," he said softly. "Just know, he won't hurt you again." I walked him to the door. As he turned down the hallway, light from the stairwell caught half his face, strong lines, calm eyes, and something fragile buried deep beneath the armor. "Thank you," I said. He paused, looked back. "You owe me dinner, not as thanks, as conversation. Some things shouldn't rot in silence." Then he left. His footsteps faded into the rain. I closed the door, leaned against it, and felt something shift inside me. That night, staring at the ceiling, I realized my hands had stopped trembling. I didn't know if it was because Mark was gone or because Lorenzo had stepped into my world. But for the first time in months, I fell asleep without hearing the sound of a door slamming in my dreams. In the days after Lorenzo left, my apartment fell into an odd kind of quiet. No more phone calls, no footsteps in the hallway at 2 a.m. I still flinched whenever a door slammed next door, but the fear didn't linger as long. Slowly, I began to relearn the rhythm of breathing, sleeping without a chair wedged under the doorknob. Silence stopped being a threat. It became fragile peace. I spent more time with Lily, my 17-year-old sister. She was in her final year of high school, dreaming of art school in Boston. Since our parents died, I'd been both sister and guardian. She was the one small piece of light that kept me going, the proof that not everything in me was broken. Each morning, she left sticky notes on the fridge. "Don't forget breakfast." I saved them all in a box. Saturday evening, I was cooking when my phone rang. Unknown number. A trembling female voice said, "Is this Ms. Reynolds?" I'm Lily's friend. There's been an accident. The world fell out from under me. I asked the same question over and over. Where? But the voice only managed St. Andrew's Hospital. I ran out into the rain, heart pounding like someone else's. By the time I reached the emergency ward, I could barely form words. Lily Reynolds, brought in tonight, I gasped at the reception desk. The nurse looked up, hesitated, then said, Room 302, don't worry, someone's already taken care of everything. I didn't understand until I opened the door. Lorenzo DeLuca was sitting there, dark suit, immaculate, hands clasped, the cold hospital light tracing the planes of his face. Beside him, Lily lay on the bed, bandaged, pale, but awake. Ava, she whispered, I'm fine, don't cry. I hadn't realized I was crying until she said it. I took her hand, trembling. What happened? Who brought you here? I did, Lorenzo said, voice steady. I was nearby. The crash happened at Fulton intersection. I followed the ambulance. I turned toward him, stunned. You know her? No, he replied, but I know you. And I knew if something happened to her, you'd break. In that moment, I didn't know whether to thank him or fear him. Lorenzo didn't just arrive. He orchestrated everything. The private room, the best doctor on call, every expense handled before I could even ask. When I tried to refuse, he simply said, You can pay me back later in a different way. Right now, let your sister rest. Lily's wide eyes darted between us, curious but cautious. When the nurse left, she whispered, Who is he, Ava? He looks dangerous. I squeezed her hand. Someone who helped me. Like Mafia helped you? She asked, half joking, half serious. I didn't answer. Lorenzo stood, moving closer. His gaze softened when it landed on Lily. Your sister's brave, he said. The doctor said just a fracture, a few weeks, and she'll be fine. He paused, lowering his voice. She's like you, too tired to cry even when she should. My throat closed. Something in his words pressed against the wall I'd built inside myself. For a moment, I wanted to cry, not from fear, but from being seen. Lily studied him, her expression caught between wariness and wonder. Thank you, Mr. Lorenzo, she said quietly. He smiled, barely, but enough to warm the sterile room. No thanks needed. I just did what had to be done. I walked him out to the hallway. You've done too much already. I don't even know what to say. Say something true, he said. I looked up into his eyes, dark, deep, impossibly calm. I'm scared. I don't know how much I should trust you, but I know. You make me stop wanting to run. He didn't smile, only nodded once, eyes gentler. Good, because some people don't need others to believe in them. They just need someone to help them believe in themselves again. I stood there as he walked down the bright hallway, his shadow long under the fluorescent light. Inside me, something small but certain stirred. Like a heartbeat I'd forgotten was still there. That night, I stayed by Lily's bedside. She slept peacefully, her bruised face softened by the steady rhythm of the monitors. On the table lay the bill Lorenzo left, blank under charges, but with one handwritten line. Taking care of the ones you love is how you start healing yourself. I read it twice, then tucked it into my coat pocket. Outside, rain whispered against the windows. I looked up at the sky and thought of the man who smelled of smoke and cedar, the one who stepped into my life as if he'd been waiting for someone who'd lived too long in the dark. That night, I wasn't afraid of the rain anymore. I was simply grateful. Lily healed faster than anyone expected. Within 2 weeks, she was walking around on crutches, her laughter filling the small apartment again. I should have felt relief. Instead, that peace made me feel hollow. At night, after Lily fell asleep, I sat by the window, staring at the city lights, trying to feel safe. But beneath the quiet, there was another kind of weight, something dark, shapeless. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Mark. Not the living Mark, but his body in some cold alley, eyes open, hand outstretched, like he was reaching for air. I woke up drenched in sweat, heart pounding. The first feeling wasn't fear, it was relief, and then, instantly, guilt. Sometimes I'd wake sitting upright, breath ragged, palms slick. I couldn't tell if I was remembering or dreaming. But I knew one thing. Whether Mark was dead or not, a part of me had died the night he disappeared. One evening, after Lily had fallen asleep, I went out to the balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the rain. The cold slipped through the fabric, but I didn't care. I just wanted to feel something. When the knock came, I wasn't surprised. A part of me had been waiting. Lorenzo DeLuca stood in the doorway, coat damp, eyes softer than usual. He lifted a paper bag. "Coffee? I figured you weren't sleeping." I let him in. We sat at the small table, the scent of coffee mingled with the rain. He watched me for a long time before saying, "You're not okay." I gave a half smile. "You always notice." "No, I just see what you try to hide." I looked down at my cup, voice shaking. "I keep dreaming about him every night. I see him dead. I don't know what's worse, that he might be, or that I feel relieved if he is." Lorenzo didn't move. His gaze was steady, grounding. "You didn't kill him," he said quietly. "You survived him." I met his eyes, dark, unwavering. "But if I'm glad he's gone, doesn't that make me a bad person?" He shook his head. "No, it makes you human. When someone pushes you to the edge, survival is instinct. Relief isn't guilt. It's your body saying thank you for being alive." I gave a wet laugh. "You make it sound so simple." "It's not," he said. "But I've been there. Survival isn't shameful. It's the smallest, truest victory a person can have." He reached across the table, fingers brushing my wrist, the same wrist he'd once bandaged. "That victory left its mark on you, not on your skin, but in how you see the world now." Tears slipped down before I could stop them. "I'm tired, Lorenzo. So tired I can't tell if I'm living or pretending to." His voice softened to a whisper. "You don't have to pretend with me. Not strong, not fine. I don't know what happened first, his hand cupping my face or me leaning in. We just met in the middle." The kiss was slow, trembling, the kind that feels like breathing for the first time, after nearly drowning. It wasn't passion, it was recognition, two survivors finding warmth in the cold. I tasted my own tears on his lips, the bitterness of coffee between us. He didn't pull me closer, only held still, as if afraid the moment would shatter. When he finally pulled away, his forehead rested against mine, our breath shared in the quiet. "You don't have to apologize," he whispered. "Sometimes the only right thing is the one that scares us most." I nodded, unable to speak. Outside, rain whispered against the glass, steady and soft. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt alive, seen, human. When Lorenzo left, he paused at the door. "If you sleep tonight," he said, "dream of something else. Not him. Dream of what you want to live for." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I'll dream about the rain." He nodded. "Good. Rain is a beginning." When the door closed, the scent of coffee and smoke lingered. I walked to the window, watching the raindrops race down the glass. My chest felt light. For the first time in months, I wasn't afraid to fall asleep. I was only afraid I might not dream. That rainy night became the fragile line dividing my life, before and after Lorenzo. Since that kiss, everything seemed to shift, not loudly or abruptly, but quietly, like water moving under a sheet of ice. He didn't call the next day, but I knew he would come back. And when he finally appeared, without warning, with just a soft knock on my door, I didn't ask why. "Do you want to go out for a while?" he asked, voice low, eyes searching mine as if waiting for permission. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. I didn't know where he intended to take me, only that I wanted to understand the man who had stepped into my life like rain, saving me, and yet impossible to predict. His car stopped in front of a glass building in Midtown. No signs, only two men in black suits standing guard at the entrance. When I walked in, the scent of polished wood and wine mixed with the sound of a piano drifting from the corner. A private dining room, soft light, refined voices, elegant faces, and Lorenzo at the center. Not the man I had kissed in the rain, but a king sitting in his own dominion. He introduced me to a few people, his tone calm, his eyes never leaving me. "Ava Reynolds, a friend," he said, and the word friend sounded more like a declaration than a description. During dinner, I realized no one asked Lorenzo many questions. They only nodded, listened, obeyed, as if every word from him carried weight. The way they looked at him with both respect and caution told me enough. His world wasn't built only on money, but on power. When we left the building, I finally dared to ask, who were those people? "Partners," he said simply. "They manage parts of my import and real estate business." I gave a small smile. "And the rest?" He turned slightly, eyes narrowing as if deciding how much truth I could bear. "The rest doesn't belong to the light." The answer tightened something inside my chest. I wasn't surprised. I had always known he wasn't ordinary. But hearing him admit it made the air heavier, like a curtain had just fallen between us. I stayed quiet for most of the ride. When he stopped the car in front of my building, he didn't turn off the engine. The streetlight outside drew sharp lines across his face. "Are you afraid?" he asked. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Maybe I'm only afraid that I'm not afraid anymore." He watched me for a few seconds, then nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. "Then don't walk away from me." The following days, I began to see more of his life, a world that existed between sophistication and danger. By day, Lorenzo was a businessman. His office sat high above Manhattan, glass walls overlooking the Hudson River, employees greeting him as Mr. DeLuca with quiet reverence. He managed import companies, restaurant chains, and large real estate projects. Everything about him looked clean, successful, the kind of man who could grace the cover of a financial magazine. But when night came, another side emerged. The late-night phone calls, the men who appeared and vanished without names, the meetings held in half-light, where Lorenzo spoke in a tone that was calm yet cold enough to make the air shift. I learned quickly that silence was safest in those moments. One evening, I visited him at his office. He stood before the window, back turned, the glow of the city reflected against the glass. The man beside him, tall, dark-haired, sharp-eyed, turned as I entered. Lorenzo introduced us. "This is Gabriel Costa, my most trusted man." Gabriel's smile was polite, but it didn't reach his eyes. Men like him, he said slowly, once you step into their world, you can't walk out the same way. I'm not sure I have another way out, I replied quietly. He gave a small nod, as if confirming what he already suspected. Loving him means accepting the dark, Gabriel continued, his gaze piercing. There's no safe line here, only those who stay and those who disappear. Lorenzo turned slightly, his eyes warning, but Gabriel only shrugged and left the room. When the door closed, silence filled the space. Lorenzo walked closer, his voice low but steady. Gabriel can be blunt, but he isn't wrong. I'll never pretend my world is clean. I looked at him, those dark eyes that seemed to swallow the light around them. I don't need it to be clean, I said softly. I just need to know that somewhere in it, I can still be myself. He took my hand, his grip firm but controlled, warmth and restraint in the same touch. If being with me makes you lose yourself, I'd rather let you go. I shook my head, a small smile tugging at my lips. You don't understand. Some of us have to walk through the dark to know how much we want the light. Lorenzo held my gaze for a long moment, then leaned down, pressing a light kiss to my forehead. Not one of desire, but of promise. Then stay, he murmured, and don't be afraid when you see me in both shades, light and dark. I've never hidden any part of myself from you. I didn't answer, only rested my head against his chest. His heartbeat was slow, steady, grounding, blending with the distant hum of the city outside. In that moment, I knew I had gone too far to turn back. And strangely, that didn't scare me. Under the golden light spilling through the window, I saw our shadows merge on the floor, entwined, inseparable, a single shape made of both light and darkness. The days after I stepped deeper into Lorenzo's world felt strangely steady. He still went to work as usual, still texted to ask if I'd eaten, still visited Lily, bringing her flowers and chocolate. We were learning how to exist beside each other without needing too many words. But just when I started to believe I could breathe peacefully in his world, the darkness began to move again. That night, I left Giovanni's late. The winter rain poured down, soaking Manhattan's streets. I pulled my coat collar high and hurried toward the subway. When I turned into the narrow alley near the shortcut, I heard footsteps behind me. At first, I thought it was coincidence, but they stayed close, heavy, deliberate. I turned around. 4 men stood in the rain, black coats, hoods up. One of them spoke with a rough accent, his R's dragged thickly. Ava Reynolds. My heart stopped mid-beat. I stepped back, my hands trembling. The man smirked. Mr. DeLuca sends his regards, he said, and motioned for 2 others to move forward. Before I could scream, headlights flashed at the end of the street. Tires screeched through puddles. A black SUV slid to a stop, the door swung open, and Gabriel stepped out. His eyes were cold as a blade. "Leave," he said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the rain. The 3 men froze, exchanged a look, then disappeared into the shadows. I stood there shaking, drenched, my pulse wild. Gabriel approached and draped his coat over my shoulders. "Let's go," he said. I stammered. "What's happening?" "Not the time to explain. Viktor Morozov just declared war. You were the message." I couldn't ask more. He pulled me into the car and slammed the door shut. Outside, the rain blurred everything, the city fading into a smear of gray and light. When the car stopped, I realized we'd reached a large mansion hidden deep in the woods. High walls, iron gates, cameras at every corner. Lorenzo was waiting at the steps, white shirt damp from rain, his eyes sweeping over me, cold at first, then soft with relief when he saw I was safe. He crossed the distance in 2 strides and pulled me into his arms, his breath unsteady. I thought I'd lost you. Gabriel placed a hand on Lorenzo's shoulder. Morozov had her watched for 2 days. He planned to take her, to draw you out. Lorenzo nodded, his tone dropping into something dark. There won't be a second chance. He turned to me. From now on, you and Lily will stay here. Just a few weeks. When things calm down, you'll go home. I looked around. The mansion was beautiful but unfamiliar. Every door had digital locks. Every exit was guarded. Outside, men in black patrolled with earpieces and holstered guns. I swallowed hard. This is safety? Absolute safety, Lorenzo said. No one can get in. I nodded, though something inside me twisted. The walls were too high, the windows barred, the faint echo of footsteps in the hallways constant. It felt like I had simply traded one cage for another, just more luxurious. Night fell. I stepped onto the veranda, the air thick with mist and pine. The lights from the gate glowed faintly through the fog. Lorenzo joined me, placing his coat over my shoulders. It's getting cold, he said. Are you ever going to tell me what's really happening? I asked quietly. He hesitated, then answered. A group that used to be partners. They wanted what I never promised. Morozov leads them. He doesn't believe in boundaries, and he thinks hurting you will weaken me. I looked at him. And did it? His eyes darkened. When I saw them try to take you off a Manhattan street, yes, but it also reminded me why I can't leave the shadows. I shivered. What will you do to them? He pressed his lips together. You don't want to know. A gust of wind carried the smell of rain and gun oil from the yard. I turned to look at him. His eyes reflected something I'd never seen before. Kindness and ruthlessness locked together. He wasn't gentle, but he had limits, and I could feel those limits being tested. I hate this feeling, I whispered, being protected, but trapped. He tilted his head slightly, voice low. I know, but sometimes, to survive, you have to accept the cage for a while. The door will open when the storm passes. And if it doesn't? He looked at me, eyes shadowed with sadness. Then I'll learn to live with the storm. I stood there, listening to the rhythm of my heartbeat, blending with the rain on the roof. From the gate, Gabriel appeared, motioning to Lorenzo. Morozov's moved. He knows she's here. Lorenzo gripped my shoulders. Go inside, Ava. You're going out there? No, he said. I'm staying right here. No one touches you. I stepped back inside but turned to look again. He stood in the white glare of the security lights, rain falling across his shoulders, his gaze fixed on the dark forest beyond the walls. In that moment, I understood. His world wasn't just darkness. It was a battlefield between love and violence, between protection and destruction. And I, whether I wanted to or not, had become a part of it. That night, after Lorenzo stood silently in the rain-soaked yard, I knew the storm hadn't truly ended. It was only waiting, gathering strength. Inside the quiet mansion, Lily and I shared a room, listening to the wind whistle through the window, like the breath of a beast waiting outside. Lily turned to me, her voice soft. Aren't you going to tell me what's really going on? I hesitated, then nodded. It was time. There was nothing left to hide. I told her everything. About Mark, about the months of bruises and fear, the night in the restaurant when he tried to kill me, and the man who saved me from his hands, Lorenzo. I told her what came after, the fear, the guilt, and the strange calm I found in his eyes. When I stopped talking, Lily said nothing. Only the sound of rain and our breathing filled the space. After a while, she whispered, "I don't know if I should be angry or proud of you. But if I had to choose between what was before and what we have now, I'd choose this." I looked at her, confused. She bit her lip. At least this danger protects us. The other one only destroyed. Her words broke something inside me. I looked at her young face, still frightened, but holding a kind of faith I didn't think I deserved. I squeezed her hand, feeling something in me begin to ease. The night stretched on. I couldn't sleep. When I stepped into the hallway, I saw a faint light coming from the library downstairs. Lorenzo was sitting there, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, arm draped over the chair, a glass of untouched whiskey before him. He didn't hear me until I was close. "You should be asleep," he said quietly. "I can't," I answered. "This house is too quiet, and I'm not." He looked at me, eyes heavier than usual, as if the whole world had settled on his shoulders. "When you look at me, what do you see?" he asked. "I see a man trying to keep a promise to himself," I said. He smiled faintly, then it faded. "My mother endured my father for 20 years, he said, voice rough. Every night she waited for the sound of the door closing, just to know she was still alive. I grew up listening to that sound. I swore the woman I love would never have to wait like that." I fell silent. He had never spoken so much about himself. The firelight flickered against his face, sharp lines softened by guilt. "Have you ever loved someone before?" I asked. "Yes," he said quietly. "But I only knew how to possess, not protect. I never learned how to keep someone without making them afraid. Until you." I moved closer, sitting beside him. "I don't need you to be a hero," I said. "I just need to know that when everything falls apart, you'll still be here." He turned to me, his dark eyes steady. "I'm not leaving again, Ava. Not this time." Neither of us spoke after that. The fire cracked softly. The smell of whiskey and burning wood filled the air. Then he reached out, not forceful, not claiming, just asking silently, "Do you trust me?" I didn't answer in words. I placed my hand over his. We found each other like two people who had been lost too long, not out of desire, but out of need to breathe the same air. When he kissed me, it wasn't impulse, it was surrender, a quiet mercy between two broken souls. It wasn't fire, it was warmth thawing through frozen skin. I remember every slow movement, every breath, every pause, where he made sure I wanted it, and I did. Not out of loneliness, but because he made me remember that I was still alive. When dawn seeped through the curtains, I woke in his arms. The gray light of morning painted our shadows on the wall. He hadn't slept. He was watching me, his eyes no longer those of a man between two worlds, but of someone holding on to the only thing keeping him human. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded, smiling faintly. For the first time in a long time, I feel safe. He pulled me closer, whispering, "I promised you. No one touches you, no one." Outside, the rain still fell, soft and steady, but it no longer sounded like a threat. Inside this guarded mansion, behind walls and cameras, I finally found something I'd never had before. Not freedom, but a place to stop running. And maybe that was the closest thing to peace I'd ever know. 2 weeks after that night, the storm finally stopped. News of Morozov's gang vanished from the headlines, and the strange cars that once lingered near the gates were gone. The air felt lighter, though no one in the house truly believed the danger was over. Even Lorenzo, calm as stone, looked different. He spoke less, and his eyes often drifted somewhere far away, as if calculating something he couldn't share. One morning, just as I finished making coffee, Gabriel appeared at the porch. "It's done," he said, voice quiet but final. "They've signed. No one will touch you or his people again." I studied him, unsure whether what I saw in his eyes was relief or exhaustion. He gave a brief nod and left without waiting for me to speak. That afternoon, Lorenzo returned. I saw him walk into the living room, remove his coat, every movement slow, deliberate, like someone who had just fought a war without weapons. He sat across from me, silent for several minutes. Only when I placed a glass of water in front of him did he finally look up. "It's over," he said, his voice rough. "Morozov backed off. He lost too much to keep fighting." "So it's finished?" "For them, maybe." He paused, watching me. "For us, not yet." I waited. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 envelopes, placing them on the table. One thick, one thin. "I've been thinking," he said, "and I know I can't keep you here forever." My heartbeat quickened. "This one," he said, pointing to the thin envelope, "has new documents, ID, passport, bank account, a small apartment in Boston under another name. You can leave any time, disappear completely. No one will find you, not even me." I looked at the other envelope. "And this," he continued, "is a key to my house, here. If you stay, everything that comes with it is yours, the good, the bad, the light, the dark." The room fell silent, so still I could hear the clock ticking. I understood what he meant, an absolute choice, no middle ground. "Do you want me to leave?" I asked. "I want you to be free," he said softly. "For once, not out of fear, not because I demand it. I want you to choose, Ava, truly choose." I stared at the envelopes. One was an escape, the other a flame. Both came with a price. In my mind, I heard Lily's laughter in the kitchen, the gentle rain outside, the sound of my own heartbeat, steady, certain. I lifted my gaze. "I choose to stay." His expression shifted slightly, almost disbelief. "Are you sure? Staying means no safety. It means seeing what you shouldn't, living where weakness isn't allowed." "I know," I said. "But I've spent my whole life running from fear. Now that I've found somewhere I don't have to run, I'm not leaving just because it's hard." He fell silent. I watched his hands tighten, then loosen, like he was holding something heavy inside. "If you stay," he said slowly, "I can only promise 3 things. No lies, no force, no control. You'll know the truth, even when it's ugly." I met his eyes, and I promise 3 things too: no pretending, no hiding, and no forgiving deceit. We looked at each other. Neither of us smiled, but I felt an odd lightness, as if we had both put something down we hadn't realized we were carrying. Lorenzo stood, walked around the table, and sat beside me. In his palm was a small metal key, catching the last light of the afternoon. "Then this is yours," he said. I took it, cold, heavy, but when his hand closed over mine, it turned warm. "You know," he said softly, "since the day I met you, it's the first time I've thought about the future. Not the kind of future a man like me deserves, but one that makes me want to live differently." I smiled. "I don't need you to be different. I just need you to be real." His eyes softened. "Real," he repeated, as if tasting the word. It's been a long time since I remembered what that meant. "Maybe you'll have to teach me." I nodded. "Then we'll learn together." That afternoon, sunlight streamed through the window, painting gold across the table and the 2 envelopes, one thick, one thin. Both still there, but I knew I'd never touch the thin one. Outside, the wind carried the scent of the storm that had just passed. In this house that once felt like a fortress, I felt it changing, no longer a cage, but a home built on truth. And when Lorenzo took my hand, I knew I'd chosen right. Not the easy path, but the flame warm enough to light what was left of us. A month after I chose to stay, life began to find its own rhythm. Not perfectly peaceful, but steady enough to make me believe that peace could be learned. In the mornings, I went to my nursing classes. In the afternoons, I helped Lily with her studies. At night, Lorenzo came home late, smelling of wind and smoke, but he always held me before saying a word. Lily had fully recovered. She started painting again, her small room filled with canvases, brushes, and the smell of oil paint. Every time I walked in, she'd say, "Careful, this color stains." Her voice was light, cheerful, as if fear had never existed in our lives. Watching her, I knew why I couldn't choose to leave. When I completed my final nursing module, the school sent my placement notice at a major Manhattan hospital. The word "congratulations" blinked on the email, and I laughed out loud. 6 months ago, I didn't think I'd live to see this day. That night, I told Lorenzo as he came home. He paused, halfway through taking off his coat, and looked at me for a long moment. "You did it," he said, voice rough but soft. "I'm proud of you," I laughed. "You make it sound like I just climbed Everest." "For you, it was harder," he said, stepping closer and placing a hand on my shoulder. "I know what you had to fight to get here." Not long after, we moved out of the mansion. Lorenzo rented a small apartment for Lily and me on the east side, secure but close to the city. Private security system, cameras, reinforced doors. Too much for 2 sisters. But I knew it was his quiet way of keeping his promise. To protect, not to control. I started working at the hospital. Long shifts, difficult patients, ambulance sirens all night, but I loved it. For the first time, I felt useful, alive, not just someone running away. Whenever exhaustion hit, I remembered what Lorenzo once told me. Survival isn't shameful, it's the truest kind of victory. As for him, he changed. Slowly, Lorenzo pulled out of the darker side of his world. Gabrielle now handled most of the old connections, while Lorenzo focused on legitimate ventures, new restaurants, medical investments, even donations to domestic violence foundations. I once asked him why, and he only smiled. Maybe I'm trying to make amends in the only way I know how. One weekend evening, he invited Lily and me to dinner with his mother. I was nervous. I had heard much about her but never met her. Her house in Old Brooklyn was small and warm, filled with the scent of bread and lavender. She greeted me with a kind smile, her eyes deep, knowing. "You're Ava," she said, her hand resting gently over mine. "I've heard a lot about you," I flushed. "I hope it's all good." She chuckled and shook her head. "When he talks about you, he doesn't say much, but I can see it in his eyes. To him, you're something he never believed he deserved." Lorenzo sat quietly, not denying it, only smiling faintly. I looked between them, mother and son, and in that instant I understood. No words were needed. Dinner was simple but full of laughter. Lily talked about school. His mother asked about my work, and Lorenzo occasionally teased her about still keeping the old clock from his grandfather's time. For the first time, he looked ordinary. Not a man of shadows, not a powerful businessman, just a son trying to hold on to peace. When Lily helped her clear the table, Lorenzo and I stepped out onto the porch. The early summer air was warm, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass. I leaned against the railing, whispering, "I get it now." He turned to me. "Get what?" "Why you protect me the way you do. You do it because no one ever protected your mother." He went quiet. His face softened, his eyes deepened. She once said that if someone had just stood between her and the fear, even once, everything would have been different, but no one did. When I grew up, I swore that if I ever loved someone, I'd be that person. I took his hand, feeling the warmth through his old scars. "You already are." He smiled gently. "No, Ava, you're the one who saved me. You gave me a reason to stop." That night, back in our apartment, I sat by the window, watching the city lights blur across the glass. Life wasn't perfect. There was still darkness, still risk. But inside, for the first time, I felt still. I had learned to live, not just to survive. Months passed, and for the first time in my life, I felt time wasn't my enemy anymore. It moved gently, neither chasing nor dragging me back into the past. Every morning, I put on my white uniform, walked the polished hospital floors, listened to the hum of monitors and the quiet voices calling for help, the sounds of real life. I no longer hid bruises. I no longer feared what waited behind closed doors. I had become a registered nurse. The name badge, Ava Reynolds, RN, gleamed on my chest. The day I received it, I stood in front of the mirror for a long time, not out of pride, but disbelief. Disbelief that the woman looking back was really me. Not a victim, not afraid. Just Ava, living. Lily changed too. She was 17 now, thriving, social, with art projects displayed at her school's gallery. She no longer flinched at the sound of doors closing. Sometimes I caught her laughing for no reason, and I knew she was finally living the youth she'd been denied. One morning, as I was sipping coffee before my shift, there was a knock on the door. 2 police officers stood outside, an older man and a young woman. They introduced themselves, saying they were re-examining the disappearance of Mark Dalton. My heart dipped for a moment, but I still invited them in. "We don't have evidence of foul play," the man said evenly, "but we're reviewing old statements to see if you remember anything new." I told them the same story. We argued, he left. I never saw him again. I didn't lie, but I didn't tell everything either. They nodded, exchanged a look, and left. When the door closed, I stood still, holding a cup of cold coffee. This time, my heart didn't race. I wasn't afraid anymore. That afternoon, Lorenzo picked me up from the hospital. He still wore dark suits, but there was something different in his eyes. Softer, calmer. He no longer carried a second phone. No late-night calls. He simply asked, "Are you tired?" We walked through the park together. Autumn leaves scattered along the path, the wind carrying the scent of grass and smoke. I told him about my shift, about an old patient who refused discharge because he missed his cat, and Lorenzo laughed. His laugh was low and rare, but every time it came, it loosened something inside me. Our life, strangely enough, didn't need grand gestures. Dinner together each night, coffee in the morning, him waiting under the hospital awning after my shift. These small, ordinary things became the quiet magic I never thought I'd have. Of course, there was still darkness. Gabriel still appeared sometimes, speaking to Lorenzo in low tones before disappearing. There were still strangers who looked too long in restaurants, cars that lingered outside the building. But I had learned not to fear them. Lorenzo and I lived between light and shadow, and slowly they blurred into something almost normal. Maybe that's how people survive storms, not by erasing the dark, but by learning to live beside it without letting it win. One night, I woke in the middle of the night, not from a nightmare, just habit. The room was quiet, Lorenzo's breathing steady beside me. I turned toward him, his face calm in the dim glow of the bedside lamp. I lay there for a long time, listening to his heartbeat, and finally let my eyes close. For the first time in years, I slept peacefully. No dreams, no fear, no vigilance. And in that sleep, I understood. The past hadn't vanished, but it no longer ruled me. The ghosts hadn't gone, but they had faded, soft enough for me to walk through them without trembling. My life still bore scars, but they no longer spoke of pain. They were proof of survival, and in the quiet warmth of the man beside me, I knew that for the first time, I wasn't just alive, I was living. The days that followed passed with a quiet peace I once thought I'd never know. Work at the hospital, the bright little apartment, evenings when Lorenzo waited after my shifts. Everything fell into rhythm, gentle and sure, as if life had finally found its harmony. Then one morning, an email appeared on my phone. Official graduation ceremony notice. I read it twice, then again, my heartbeat slowing, then quickening, like I was listening to the pulse of my own life. The ceremony was held in the nursing school's grand hall. Hundreds of students in white gowns and square caps, sunlight streaming through tall glass windows. When they called my name, I stepped onto the stage, my hands trembling slightly, a smile I couldn't hide. The instructor handed me my certificate, and in that instant, I heard applause. Not loud, but familiar enough to make my heart tighten. I looked down into the crowd. Lorenzo stood among the rows in a dark suit, his face calm, but his eyes brighter than I'd ever seen them. Beside him was his mother, graceful in a pale blue dress, and Lily next to her, waving at me with teary eyes. I smiled back, and in that moment I knew everything I had endured had led me here. After the ceremony, we went to a small riverside restaurant. The evening light shimmered across the water, painting it gold and orange. Lily couldn't stop laughing, talking about her upcoming art exhibit, while Lorenzo's mother told stories from his childhood. He once got punished for protecting a boy from bullies, she said, her tone proud. Lorenzo just smiled and took my hand under the table, a small gesture warmer than any words. As dinner drew to a close, the river breeze lifted the tablecloth slightly. Lorenzo looked at me, voice low but steady. You know, I used to think I could never change. I thought all I'd ever know was control and distance. But then you came along, and everything started shifting. He paused, eyes drifting toward the water. You made me into someone my mother can be proud of, and you taught me that love isn't about holding, it's about standing still together. I squeezed his hand. Tears slipped down before I could stop them. I turned to Lily. She was laughing, resting her head on his mother's shoulder, both of them quietly sharing dessert. The sight made my chest ache in the best way. I once thought family was something I'd never have, but it hadn't vanished. I just had to live long enough to find it again. In another form, simple, real. The sun sank lower, turning the sky crimson. I leaned against Lorenzo's shoulder, hearing his voice close to my ear. "Now you can start again," he murmured, "without the past pulling you back." I smiled. "I don't want to start again. I just want to keep going from right here." He smiled back, and for the first time, I saw no shadows in his eyes, only peace, the kind we had both earned through every scar. By the river, city lights glimmered like a man-made constellation. Lily took photos, his mother laughed softly, and Lorenzo held my hand tight. No one spoke, but we all knew. We had made it through the storm, and this was our reward. Not a perfect ending, but a gentle beginning. And in the stillness of that night, I realized I had everything. Not all things, but the ones worth keeping. A family, a love, and a peace long enough to dream of tomorrow. On the last night of summer, the New York sky was unusually clear. The wind off the Hudson carried a trace of salt and the fading scent of wildflowers. I'd just finished a late shift, still in my nurse's uniform, when Lorenzo texted, "Meet me by the river." No reason, no explanation, just that, and somehow I already knew where he'd be. The Hudson at night always felt peaceful. Golden streetlights stretched along the path, their reflections scattered like fallen stars on the water. When I arrived, Lorenzo was already there. White shirt, hands in his pockets, facing the river. The glow from the city framed him softly, part man, part silhouette. He turned when he heard my footsteps. No smile, no greeting, just that quiet, steady gaze, as if he'd been holding this moment in his mind for a long time. "You're here," he said softly. I nodded, standing beside him, watching the ripples drift across the surface. For a while, neither of us spoke, only wind and the faint echo of a distant ferry horn. "I used to hate silence," he said at last, "because it made me hear myself, but now I'm afraid of losing it, this silence that only exists when you're near." I smiled. "You finally learned how to be still, and now you want to keep it forever?" He chuckled quietly, but his eyes held something deeper, a calm resolve. He took a breath, then said, "Ava, I can't promise peace. My life has never known it. But I promise honesty. I promise devotion, on good days and bad. I don't want you to be part of my darkness. I want you to be the reason I step out of it." I didn't answer. My heart was pounding, not from fear, but from knowing that what he said was real. No grand gestures, no practiced words, only the raw truth of someone learning to love through his scars. Lorenzo reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. He opened it slowly. Inside was a simple silver ring. No diamond, no embellishment, just light catching faintly on the smooth metal. He looked up at me, voice low, each word deliberate. "You're not something to be saved, Ava," he said. "You're the reason I wanted to change." My vision blurred, not from tears alone, but from the realization that everything broken in me was quietly mending, imperfect, yet whole in its own way. I didn't need promises of forever. I only needed this, truth, and someone willing to stay even when it hurts. I held out my hand and whispered, "And you're not someone who needs redemption. You're someone learning how to love." He smiled, a rare, unguarded smile. He slid the ring onto my finger, his thumb brushing over my skin. A gesture so gentle it trembled. The river breeze swept around us, cool and alive, and I realized I was crying and smiling all at once. We sat together on a wooden bench, facing the city lights flickering across the water. Neither of us spoke, but everything had already been said. I leaned my head on his shoulder, feeling his heartbeat steady beneath the noise of the world. There was no fear left, only stillness, deep and sure. I knew we weren't the kind of story that ended in perfection. We didn't choose each other for safety or rescue. We chose each other knowing the risks and loving anyway. The darkness around us didn't disappear. It simply stepped back, making room for a smaller, truer light, the kind born between two people who had been broken but still believed. Under the shimmering Hudson lights, Lorenzo's hand tightened around mine, and in that moment, in this messy, imperfect world of ours, I understood. This wasn't an ending, it was a promise between two souls who had once been lost and now had found each other, not to be saved, but to live.